The clock on the diner wall read 11:47 p.m. when Marcus woke up to the sound of her shift ending. She had been working at Betty's Diner for 3 years, a small restaurant tucked away on the corner of Maple and Fifth, where the coffee was always hot and the pie was homemade. On this particular December night, the snow fell thick and heavy outside the frosted windows, transforming the world into a blanket of white. Marcus had clocked out 5 minutes early, eager to escape the warmth of the diner and head home to her modest apartment, where her own daughter waited with her mother. The walk to the bus stop was only 2 blocks, a route Marcus had traveled hundreds of times without incident. But tonight felt different. The snow was coming down so hard that she could barely see 3 feet in front of her face. The streetlights above cast an amber glow that seemed to be swallowed by the endless white. As Marcus pulled her coat tighter around her body and lowered her head against the wind, she heard something that made her freeze in her tracks. It was a sound so small, so desperate, that it cut through the howling winter storm like a knife, a baby crying. Marcus stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, her eyes searching the darkness and snow. The sound came again, more urgent this time, more pained. Without thinking, she turned toward the noise and began walking deeper into the snowstorm. Her heart pounded in her chest as she moved forward, following the sound of the infant's wails. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, she spotted it. A car, half buried in snow, crashed against a telephone pole. The front end was smashed, the windshield shattered like broken glass. Marcus ran toward the vehicle, her legs struggling through the deep snow. She reached the driver's side window and peered inside, squinting against the darkness. A woman sat motionless in the driver's seat, her head slumped against the steering wheel. There was blood on her face. But it was the sound that guided Marcus now, the sound of a baby, crying from somewhere in the back seat. Without hesitation, Marcus pulled open the passenger door, which was still operational, and climbed inside the wrecked car. There, strapped in an infant car seat, was a tiny baby girl, no more than 6 months old, screaming at the top of her lungs. The baby's lips were turning blue from the cold, and her skin was pale and blotchy. Marcus immediately began checking the mother's pulse, finding one, faint but present. She was alive. Marcus pulled her phone from her pocket with shaking hands and dialed 911, giving the dispatcher their location while simultaneously trying to warm the baby by rubbing her arms and body. The wait for the ambulance felt endless. Snow continued to fall around the broken car, and the baby's cries began to weaken, her tiny body losing strength to the cold. Marcus kept talking to the baby, whispering encouragement, promises, anything to keep that fragile spark of life burning. She removed her own coat and wrapped it around the infant, holding her close to her chest, sharing her body heat with this stranger's child. When the ambulance finally arrived, sirens wailing through the snowy night, Marcus felt tears streaming down her face, mixing with the snow and sweat. Paramedics rushed to the scene, and Marcus stepped aside, her body numb from cold and shock. As they loaded the mother into the ambulance, one of the paramedics looked at Marcus and said something she would never forget: "You saved this baby's life. If you hadn't found her when you did, she wouldn't have made it another 5 minutes in this cold." 3 days after the accident, Marcus was back at work at Betty's Diner, trying to find normalcy in the routine of coffee refills and pie orders. The story of her heroic rescue had somehow made it to the local news, and now regular customers kept coming up to her, patting her on the back, telling her she was a hero. Marcus felt uncomfortable with all the attention. She had simply done what any decent human being would do. To her, there was nothing remarkable about it. But everything changed when a man walked into the diner late in the afternoon, a man with weathered skin, kind eyes, and a leather jacket bearing the insignia of the Iron Stallions Motorcycle Club. His name was Daniel, and he was searching for the young woman who had saved his daughter's life. The mother in the car was his ex-wife, Sarah, and the baby was his 6-month-old daughter, Emma. Daniel had been away on a business trip when Sarah lost control of her car, when she crashed in the snowstorm, when Marcus found his baby girl and held her close as if she were her own. He had spent the last 3 days visiting his daughter in the hospital, watching her recover from hypothermia, watching her cling to life with the determination of someone who knew, somehow, that she had been chosen to survive. When Daniel saw Marcus taking orders from a table of construction workers, he knew immediately that it was her. There was something in her eyes, something kind and genuine, that had been described to him by the paramedics and the doctors. He waited until she had finished serving her customers, and then he approached her. Marcus saw the leather jacket first, then the motorcycle club insignia, and her guard went up. But when Daniel spoke, his voice was so filled with gratitude, so thick with emotion, that she knew she was hearing truth. "You saved my daughter's life," he said simply. "I don't know how to thank you. I don't know if there are enough words in the English language to express what I feel toward you right now. He pulled out his wallet and showed Marcus a photo of Emma, the baby, wrapped in a hospital blanket and smiling with toothless gums. Emma was no longer blue, no longer struggling for breath. She was alive because of Marcus. Daniel told Marcus that her actions had united his motorcycle club in a way that nothing else ever had. They wanted to do something for her, something that would show her that her kindness had not gone unnoticed or unappreciated. Marcus was overwhelmed. She had not done what she did that night for recognition or reward. She had done it because it was right. But as she looked into Daniel's grateful eyes and saw the photo of the recovered baby, she understood that sometimes our actions ripple outward in ways we cannot predict or control. Daniel told her to expect a visit soon, something special planned by the club. Marcus thanked him but didn't expect anything extraordinary. She had no idea what was about to unfold. Over the next few days, Marcus found herself thinking more and more about Emma and Daniel. She had received her address somehow, and a thank you card arrived at her apartment. Inside was a beautiful handwritten note from Sarah, Emma's mother, expressing her eternal gratitude and sharing details about Emma's recovery. The baby was doing wonderfully. The doctors said she would have no lasting complications from the cold exposure. Sarah wrote that she believed Marcus had been sent by God himself to save her daughter, that she would spend the rest of her life grateful for the selflessness of a stranger. But then the rumors started. Co-workers at the diner began whispering when they thought Marcus wasn't listening. The motorcycle club, they said, wasn't just any group of bikers. The Iron Stallions had a reputation that preceded them, not all of it good. While they had done charity work and helped their community, they had also been involved in some unsavory business dealings. Some people said they were dangerous, that getting involved with them was risky, that Marcus should be careful about what attention their gratitude might bring into her life. Marcus's mother called her, concerned. "Baby, I heard something about some bikers planning something for you. I'm worried. You don't know these people. You don't know what they want. Please be careful." Her voice shook with maternal anxiety, and Marcus felt the weight of her mother's fear. But when she looked at Emma's photo, when she thought about that night in the snowstorm, when she remembered how that tiny girl's lips had been turning blue, Marcus knew she could not reject gratitude simply because of preconceived notions or rumors. Still, doubt began to creep into Marcus's mind. She found herself more guarded, more cautious. She started paying attention to her surroundings in ways she hadn't before. She noticed a few motorcycles parked outside her apartment building a couple of times. She wondered if she was being watched, if this was something sinister rather than something kind. At work, she asked a regular customer, an older man named Frank who worked in security, what he thought about the Iron Stallions. Frank leaned in close and told her they were good people, mostly, but that they took their loyalty very seriously. They didn't forget acts of kindness, but they also didn't forget disrespect. A week after Daniel's visit to the diner, Marcus received a phone call. It was Daniel again, his voice cheerful and warm. "We're planning something special for you," he said. "This Sunday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, at Miller's Park. We're doing a thank you event. Bring your family. Bring your friends. It's going to be beautiful, I promise." Marcus felt her anxiety spike. 2 o'clock in the afternoon seemed public enough, safe enough, but she still felt nervous. She agreed to attend, not wanting to offend Daniel or seem ungrateful, but she decided she would bring her mother and her daughter with her, safety in numbers. As she hung up the phone, Marcus stared out her apartment window at the snow that was just beginning to fall again. The same kind of snow that had brought her face to face with Emma on that terrible night that had somehow become a wonderful turning point. She wondered what Daniel and the Iron Stallions had planned for Sunday. She had no way of knowing that her entire world was about to change, that something extraordinary was about to unfold in ways she could never have anticipated or imagined. Sunday arrived cold and crisp, with patches of leftover snow dotting the ground like memories of the blizzard. Marcus had dressed carefully, choosing a navy blue coat over a simple white sweater and dark jeans. Her mother, Dorothy, wore a burgundy jacket, and her 8-year-old daughter, Zara, had been excited all morning about a special event that involved ice cream and maybe fireworks. Marcus hadn't told them much about what to expect. She was still uncertain herself, still cautious despite her desire to believe in Daniel's kindness. When they arrived at Miller's Park at 1:55 p.m., Marcus's heart began to race. The parking lot was already filled with motorcycles, dozens and dozens of them, their chrome catching the winter sunlight. More bikers continued to arrive as Marcus watched, pulling into the park in groups of 2s and 3s, their engines rumbling like distant thunder. Dorothy grabbed Marcus's hand, her own anxiety spiking to match her daughter's. "Baby, Maybe we should go, she whispered. But before Marcus could respond, she saw Daniel walking toward them, a huge smile on his face. Marcus. I'm so glad you came, he called out. Then he bent down to Zara's level and said, and you must be Zara. I have someone who really wants to meet you. He looked back up at Marcus. Come with me, please. We have a little surprise. With Dorothy's hand still gripping hers, Marcus followed Daniel deeper into the park. What she saw then made her stop dead in her tracks. The entire park had been transformed. There were banners and decorations strung everywhere, and at the center of it all was a massive stage with a sound system. More motorcycles continued to arrive, and more bikers stepped out, all of them wearing the Iron Stallion's insignia. How many people are coming? Marcus asked, her voice small and uncertain. About 200, Daniel replied simply. The entire club. From our chapter and 4 nearby chapters. They all heard what you did, Marcus. They all wanted to be here to say thank you. Marcus felt dizzy. 200 bikers? For her? It seemed impossible, surreal, like something from a movie rather than real life. Dorothy squeezed her daughter's hand tighter, but Marcus noticed her expression shifting from fear to curiosity as she watched the bikers embrace each other, pat each other on the back, smile and laugh together. Then Daniel led them to the stage, and Marcus realized they were expected to go up there. In front of all 200 bikers. Her legs felt like rubber as she climbed the stairs, but she forced herself to move. Once on the stage, Daniel took the microphone and silence fell across the entire crowd. Hundreds of eyes turned toward Marcus. Her heart pounded so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. This woman, Daniel said, pointing to Marcus, is the reason my daughter Emma is alive today. 3 weeks ago, in a snowstorm, this young lady risked her own safety and comfort to save a baby she had never met, a baby whose mother she didn't know, a baby whose father she would never even know. She is a hero. And the Iron Stallions recognize heroes. The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound washing over Marcus like a wave. Then Daniel announced that the club had organized a scholarship fund in Emma's name, with all the proceeds going to community programs for low-income families. The first recipient would be nominated by Marcus herself. What happened next brought Marcus to tears. One by one, the bikers approached the stage, each one stopping to hug Marcus, to thank her, to share stories about why they were grateful for her actions. Some told her about their own daughters, their own children, how they had thought about Emma being cold and helpless, how the thought had motivated them to be better people themselves. An elderly biker with weathered hands told her that her kindness had reminded him why the club existed, not for trouble or profit, but for community and loyalty. By the time the event ended 3 hours later, Marcus had heard from representatives of each of the 5 chapters, had received gifts and cards from bikers' families, and had been hugged so many times that she had lost count. The scholarship fund in Emma's name launched officially 2 weeks later, with Marcus as one of the selection committee members. She had quit her job at Betty's Diner, not because of anything bad, but because the Iron Stallions had insisted on helping her pursue her dream of becoming a social worker. They offered to pay for her education, to provide her with internship opportunities, to support her in every way possible. At first, Marcus had resisted, not wanting to feel obligated or indebted. But Daniel had explained it simply, you gave us a gift the night you saved Emma. Now we're returning the gift. That's how community works. That's how family works. And somehow, over those 2 weeks, Marcus realized that the Iron Stallions had become like family to her. Daniel called her every few days to check in. Sarah, Emma's mother, invited her to Sunday dinners at her home, where Emma, now a happy and healthy baby, crawled around and played while the adults talked. Marcus's mother, Dorothy, had struck up an unlikely friendship with one of the older bikers, a man named Robert who was divorcing his wife and needed advice on co-parenting. Even Zara had received her own motorcycle club jacket, a miniature version made especially for her, with her name stitched across the back. 3 months after the event in Miller's Park, Marcus stood in a small office on the campus of the local community college, where she had just been accepted into the social work program with a full scholarship paid for by the Iron Stallions Motorcycle Club. She was 32 years old, and for the first time in her life, she felt like the future was open and unlimited. She thought about that night in the snowstorm, about the crying baby, about how a single moment of compassion had set off a chain reaction of kindness and community that had transformed her life in ways she never could have imagined. The media had picked up the story again, this time focusing on the scholarship fund and Marcus's new path. News outlets ran stories about how a motorcycle club defied stereotypes and came together to support a stranger who had helped one of their own. The Iron Stallions received interview requests from national television networks, But Daniel told reporters that the story wasn't about them, it was about what could happen when people chose to recognize and celebrate kindness in the world. 6 months into her social work program, Marcus was doing an internship at a community center, working with low-income families in her neighborhood. She recognized many of the faces, they were the same people she used to serve pie to at Betty's diner. She worked with a young mother who was struggling with addiction, helping her find treatment programs and support. She worked with children whose families were living in poverty, providing resources and connections to assistance programs. She worked with domestic violence survivors, teenagers at risk, elderly people who felt forgotten and alone. Every time Marcus helped someone, every time she connected a person with resources they needed, she thought about that night in the snowstorm. She thought about how she could have walked past that crying baby, how she could have told herself it wasn't her responsibility, how she could have kept walking toward the bus stop and gone home. But she hadn't. Instead, she had followed her heart into the snow and into danger, and that decision had changed not just Emma's life or her own life, but the lives of hundreds of people in her community. One day, about a year after the snowstorm, Marcus received a package in the mail. Inside was a small photo album. The cover read, Emma's first year. Inside were pictures of Emma as a newborn in the hospital, Emma coming home, Emma's first smile, Emma's first holidays. And there, carefully inserted throughout the album, were Marcus's own contributions, photos of Emma at the diner where Marcus sometimes worked part-time to help pay for expenses, photos of Emma with her mother Sarah, photos of Emma at her first birthday party. The final photo was of Marcus holding Emma, both of them smiling at the camera. Sarah had written a note on the back, to the woman who gave my daughter life. Emma will grow up knowing your name, knowing your story, knowing that a stranger's kindness saved her life. Thank you for being our miracle. Love, Sarah. Marcus pressed the photo to her heart and smiled, tears streaming down her face. She had come full circle, from saving a life to dedicating her own life to saving others. And it had all begun with a single cry in the snow, a single act of courage, and a single moment when she had chosen love over fear.